In the reading Inward Sea Meditations of the Heart by Howard Thurman, he says this. He says, there is in every person an inward sea. And in that sea, there is an island. And on that island, there is an altar. And standing guard before that altar is the angel with a flaming sword. Nothing can get by that angel to be placed upon that altar unless it has the mark of your inner authority. This is your crucial link with the eternal. Richard Rohr, in one of the earlier chapters, referred to the scriptural story of Mary and Martha. And he did a beautiful metaphysical interpretation of this story. If you know the gist of the story, the master teacher is in the house. And the master teacher is in the house, and so are the sisters, Mary and Martha. And Martha stops to really get everything ready, to just make sure the house is in order, the brownies are in the oven, the bathroom's clean for the master teacher, make sure that all the cheese is cut perfectly on the cutting board, make sure that when he walks in, he knows this space has been prepared for him. That is one of her sacred gifts. And Mary, the other sister, is just in awe. Just beaming with consciousness and gratitude that she is in the midst of the master teacher. And she gives herself the time to drop and stop everything and to sit with him, to be with him, to be immersed in the teachings, to get the moment, to really soak it in. Meanwhile, Martha is just busy. She's got the Zoom on and she's managing the Zoom room. She's putting chats into the chat bar, letting everybody know what's happening. She's got the video camera. She's making sure she can document it so we can write this up in the newsletter. We got to get it in the newsletter. So just stop the bus. Hold on, wait, Jesus, would you just turn your head like that again? Now lean into Mary, just like that's right. I got that shot. She is making sure that everything is ordered. Her hair is good. Everything's just right, because it should be just right. And I want to make sure that he feels, seen and known and this and that. And the whole gist of the story is that we think we should be like Martha's. We think we should be perfect. We think we should be prepared. We think it should be pretty. We think there's a right way to do it. And in truth, when we are faced with a divine appointment, a divine invitation, a holy moment, it doesn't matter how we show up. It doesn't matter if we think we're prepared. All that matters is that we give it the divine yes. And that we show up for that holy moment, knowing that we are worthy, knowing that we are more than enough, knowing that it is here and seeing it, not missing it because we were so busy. But being about the deep work, the inner work, being about the present moment, the now moment. How often do we take ourselves out of right now? We either get dragged into the past emotionally or mentally, or we just get pulled towards the future out of excitement or whatever it might be, dread, excitement, whatever, you fill in the blanks. But we so often fail to see what is in front of us this moment. So today's invitation is about learning to see how the mystics see, to see with our third eye and to feel with our heart center, knowing that there is in each one of us, as Howard Thurman said, an inward sea, and that it is in our divine design that we have the ability for discernment to know what thoughts, ideas, and teachings resonate with our heart, to know those ones that are allowed onto our altar, that are written upon our heart, and to know those ideas, the dogma, the teachings, the whatever religion of our education, you fill in the blank, that does not need to enter the temple. And when you merge that with present moment practice, we say yes to the invitation right here and right now to use our inner authority to be fully present. Richard Rohr goes into the teachings this week of the master teacher, and how very often the words and the teachings of Jesus the Christ, or Christed One, are misunderstood, misinterpreted, and misused. So often we see the master teacher's teachings being something that seem expansive, but people use them to narrow it down, narrow it down, narrow it down, narrow it down, exclude, throw out, unworthy, do it like this, exactly like that. There's a right way, there's a wrong way. You're either in the boat or you're out of the boat. But Richard Rohr points out that Jesus was really what he calls the first non-dual thinker in the West. The first non-dual thinker in the West. And he points out Jesus's contemplative teachings and this non-dual message about ultimate reality. Richard Rohr says some of his most provocative sayings make much more sense when read non-dual, in a non-dual way. And he says, and in many cases, they're incomprehensible in any other way. Have you found that? Have you found that they may be, and scripture may be incomprehensible, irrelevant, even destructive, if not read through the eyes of a mystic and through the heart of a lover? He points out to us that Jesus could have answered questions with clarity and conviction. Have you ever thought of this? He could have answered questions with clarity and conviction, right? He's being asked a question and he's there with his disciple and he's there with the community. He's there with the people of the time, and he could have just given them the answers. But even today, people are still questioning and asking, what did he mean by that? What was he really saying? I think he said this. Well, we think he said that. The Catholics think he said this. The Protestants think he said this. These people think he said that. These people think this. Richard Rohr goes on to say that Jesus's sayings were enigmatic and confusing and often frustrating to the reader, saying that if he had been primarily concerned about perfect clarity from his side and obvious understanding on our side, he surely didn't do very well as a communicator, even in his lifetime. Teaching that ultimate reality or the kingdom is always like something, clearly a simile or a metaphor, inviting further experience and journey, not an idea with definitions that could be checked true or false on a student exam. Not the idea of giving us something that could be checked true and false. You got it right, included. You got it wrong, excluded. No. Instead, he gave us an invitation into further experience and journey. The path, the way. You know, another word for Jesus is the way. The consciousness of the practice. I am the way and the truth and the life. That does not mean it's just through me as a person, as an individual. That was not the teaching. The teaching was that the I am nature, the awakening, is the way. So Jesus, largely communicating through parables, stories, and as Richard Rohr says, often deeply obscure riddles, does something. It does something. It can actually do a lot of things, right? It's done a lot in history, or let's just say we've used it to do a lot in history. So it's not good or bad, but we've used it for good and bad, right? But this spaciousness that the master teacher put around the teachings, rather than delivering them with facts and clarity and do this and do that, invited people into a path towards spiritual maturity, towards awakening, towards spiritual development. Just like a parent, right? A parent with a child. What happens if you do everything for a child? What happens if you're the one that does your child's homework? What if you're the one that fills out your child? One of my friends is working with college applications right now. What happens if you fill out all your kids' child applications to every college, right? Rather than giving them the tools to do it and saying, here you go, you have my support. Let me know if you need me. If from preschool on, you're doing their coloring and you're doing their work, you're financing their bank account. Well, maybe in kindergarten, okay. But sometimes that's still happening, right? For grandparents and great grandparents, that we're not becoming self-sustainable on our own. And there's no real idea of self-sustainable. Everything is a community. Everything is a give and take. Everything is an ebb and flow. But until we mature ourselves, until we raise ourselves, until we grow ourselves up, we are dependent not on community, but on others' resources. And that creates an interesting paradigm. And the master teacher was inviting us out of that paradigm to know our own spiritual resources, the ones that can't be taken away, the ones that generate, not the ones that you have to hold on to and store up in a storehouse, but the ones that are there no matter where you are. So this way of teaching, this way of giving a story, this way of inviting us into the path, the way of giving a phrase, a poem, a prophetic line, does something. What does it do? It gets us out of our head and into our heart. It moves us from the intellect into experience. It moves us out of my way and into the inner path. It almost tricks the mind not to think systematically or in a linear fashion or in the time-space continuum, like Zen phrases and sayings, like spiritual teachings that have been with us through the ages. George Bataille said, mere words have something of quicksand about them. Only experience is the rope that is thrown to us. The words have quicksand, but experience is the rope that is thrown to us. So Richard Rohr talks about ultimate reality, talks about the spiritual realm and the human condition. And he refers to the teachings of Jesus saying, it's not here, it's not there, it's within you. That's what we teach in unity, that it is within you. So don't look here, don't look there, don't get distracted by the shiny things outside of yourself. Don't get distracted by the big temple or the high and holy priest that says they have the answer and they can hand it to you if you just whatever, if you just give, if you just show up, if you just follow this book, if you just put this rule list on your refrigerator and check it off every day, and then you're in. Not the deep teachings. Richard Rohr says, once you over-localize God's action in one place, church service, sacrament, or any kind of event, we can easily conclude it is not in another place, or even worse, that it is not available everywhere all of the time. Unity's practice and principles are that there is one power and one presence, and that it is everywhere present, that it is in you, it is in all creatures, all life, all beings. Richard Rohr says, if God is everywhere, then God is not anywhere exclusively. If God is everywhere, then God is not anywhere exclusively. Now, if we could make that the firm foundation from which any religion and every religion rests upon, can you imagine the world peace that may result from that? Can you imagine the lifting of judgment? The invitation into freedom. Richard Rohr says, poor spiritual teaching is always saying only here and only there, such as only in my church. Good spiritual teaching is saying always and everywhere. Good spiritual teaching acknowledges that you could go to church at a riverbed. You can be absorbed into church with your 6-string wood instrument. And you can go to church in a sanctuary. Because it's not a place, it's a consciousness. The trappings of religion and the trappings of a limited God concept are that they bind us and they lead us into judgment. Richard Rohr says good theology always protects God's total freedom and does not demand that God follow our rules. Woo! Does not demand that God follow our rules, protecting God's total freedom. God ends up, he says, when we don't do that, looking rather petty, needy, narcissistic, and easily offended. It's high time that we stop making God in our image. In the image of our limitation, in the image of our ego, in the image of our divisiveness, in the image of our polarizing minds. And recognize that we are spiritual beings and it is ours to awaken to the truth that we are made in the image of absolute love, of absolute wholeness, of absolute life. And it doesn't matter, there's no God out there that's going to care what you call that or if you call it anything at all. It doesn't have self-confidence problems and self-esteem issues. It's not in therapy for that. The human condition is in therapy for that. And Richard Rohr talks about that it's not our spiritual condition that we actually need to fix or resolve. Our spiritual condition is just what we are. It's being humans that we could work on. Amen? It's being human that we could work on. We have a hard time doing our humanity. That's where our growing edge is. Our divinity takes care of itself. It's our humanity that gets on a little stool and starts judging it. It's our humanity that cuts others down. It's our humanity that wants to be elevated above. It's our humanity that doesn't listen to the holy moments. And that, even that doesn't need to be a criticism or another layer of judgment or guilt on us. It's simply the beauty of the present moment invitation all the time. And you know what? There's nothing we need to do to earn it. There's no stuff we have to fix or fiddle through or get done with or do anything to get there. You don't have to earn it. It is right here in the present moment all the time when we just show up. When we show up. When we say yes. So what if we could accept? What if we could accept that religion, church, spiritual practice, the journey, all of it is not about getting the rules written down so we can follow them. It's not about getting the facts right. It's not about solving, decoding, or even fully understanding anything. but it's about experience. If we can accept that, if we can accept that we really can't figure it all out and get it down in a book, and we don't need to, in fact, it'd be futile to. Like, imagine trying to get an ant to understand your consciousness. And I'm not talking about your auntie, an ant. Imagine if you were dead set on getting a little tiny ant to understand your psyche. And you're just sitting there with an ant going, come on, get me. Okay, get it. Come on, get it. Doesn't it sound insane? And thinking that that ant needs to write a book for all of the other ants to teach them how to understand what it's crawling on. Right? It's crawling on the hand right here. And that ant's job to let everybody know. We're going to write a children's book right here, right now. What if the ant's job is to just sit there with you on the hand and experience being on the hand? Maybe munch at a little dead skin cells. I don't know. And then go back just full with that experience to the ant tribe or whatever, ant colony, to the ant colony. Bring it back to the colony. This is where I've been. I can point you in the right direction, but I would really only be able to describe about 4 inches of the palm. Doesn't it make sense that in a world of wonder, where there are 4-legged creatures and oceans and trees and seasons and temperatures and lava, and that we're actually sitting on a spinning sphere, but we're popped out, like we're not, you know, we're not looking at it, we're like, look down at it, and only our feet are stuck on the sphere. The rest of us is actually flying through space like this. We're all flying through space like this, right? In a world of wonder where there are galaxies, where there are planets, where there are black holes, and a creative intelligence that is so self-evident that it would be futile to try with this human mind, with my humanity, to get it down, to get it right, to get the rules, and to start putting that into a practice that I give to others so that I can teach them. Richard Rohr quotes St. Augustine saying, if you understand it, then it is not God. If you understand it, then it is not God. Richard Rohr asks us if we would join in him saying, I would not respect any God that I could figure out. I would not respect any God that I could figure out. When we take this leap, when we take this deep dive on the path, if we can accept this and let go, then the goal changes. That's the good news. Then the goal changes. Still, the mind will do what the mind does. The mind's going to want to figure out. The mind's going to want to write books. The mind's going to want to create structures and infrastructures to try to get there, pave the highways. But that's okay. We don't have to buy into it being right. Maybe a path, maybe an option, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but you are there at the altar with discernment, with a spiritual practice that is immersed in awareness and mindfulness. So when we're on this path, the goal changes. We start seeking something else. We start seeking, rather than seeking right and wrong and seeking structures, we seek experience. The ego, or our humanity, wants to know, it wants to be right, it wants to be superior. The ego wants to be superior, even if our humanity doesn't. Wants to be safe, it wants control, it wants to solve things, and that's okay. But the soul seeks peace. The soul seeks experience, unity, love. That's why Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, ideated the idea of the 12 powers coming from the chakra centers and other spiritual traditions. After studying all spiritual traditions, he brought things into Unity, saying, this is the good they have in common, and I'm going to call it unity. And he came up with the 12 powers: life, imagination, faith, love, order, will, wisdom, discernment or judgment, imagination. That these are faculties, that this is really what the soul is seeking and what the soul has the constant present moment invitation to develop. And the master teacher didn't give dogma and books. In fact, nothing was written down, right? Didn't type it up, didn't write it down. He gave teachings. He demonstrated the power of power, true power. And yes, there was organizing around him, but he did not create an organization. See, teachings can be used to ostracize or to make guilty, to condemn, to assess or to bless, to bestow worthiness or to take it away. But the teachings of ultimate reality are to lift, inspire, guide, comfort, and awaken. Power. We can use our faculty of power to try to have the corner market on something, to grow our own power or control, to dominate, to control the narrative, to create exclusivity, to build dominion. Or we can use power to heal, to love, to serve, as the master teacher did. And right, there was an invitation to do another type of demonstration of power, right? A lot of invitations. There was a lot of confusion around the master teacher's plan. There was a lot of organizing going on, saying, hey, if you have this power, let's get it over here. Let's get it over there. Why don't you do me that? Show me that. Come on, get on that donkey and ride it over here. Let's just fix this. Let's fix that. But that wasn't done, was it? Instead, empowerment was offered. Empowerment that would go beyond the time and the space that this power was needed for. Empowerment that says, I'm not going to do your homework for you. I'm not going to pay your bill for you. I'm not going to clean it for you. I'm not going to send it in. What I'm going to do is demonstrate it and show you you have the tools. And I am going to see the you that has mastered it. I am going to see in that our union, the yoking, the holy yoking that happens when you know who and whose you are. So we have the teachings, we have the power, and then we have the organizing or the organization. Well, for the master teacher, the organizing was used to serve, to teach. Remember, people wanted to use his power for the human condition. People organized around him to support and further the work. But he did not declare an organization, did he? He did not make a new religion, and he wasn't Christian. Newsflash, if anyone's still thinking that, he was Jewish. He may still be Jewish. He's everything. All, everything, and nothing. But he did not declare an organization. He didn't break off and he didn't start one. He simply taught, he simply demonstrated his power, and he simply invited people into serving, which looks like organizing. but he taught a healing power, and he taught an expansive God consciousness idea. But in the human condition, we build organizations around things. We organize to the degree that we end up often limiting ourselves and putting God into a box and forgetting why we started organizing in the first place. We begin to have systems and corporations and churches that somehow get the idea that they need to sustain themselves, that they need to stay alive too, rather than the work. We get distracted. We think, oh, we need to keep this job, or we need to keep this building. We need to start serving so that this church serves itself, so it's existent in the future. Well, emerging church is not about that. Emerging church is about the teaching and the power and the organizing, but not the organization. And if the organization is not fluid enough to get the holy moment and to get the invitation, then it will deteriorate, no matter how much it clings or grasps or tries to hold on to the old structures. And the same thing with the emerging paradigm around us. The structures will continue to crumble until we say yes, and we see with third eye seeing, we see with deeper vision, and we get to the true intention, which is more about the teaching and the power than the structures or the books. So Richard Rohr talks about the purpose. Our purpose is to, in my mind, support, awaken, transform, to support the teachings. And we only exist to support the experience that the soul seeks. All of this actually only exists to support the experience the soul seeks. We have so many other ideas we put in place, and we invest so much more time in these other things than we do that idea of supporting the soul and what the soul seeks. I want to share a couple of more things from Richard Rohr about the expansive God and expansive religion. He invites us out of the dualistic mind, because the dualistic mind, he says, is what helps keep us in line. It makes an us or them consciousness, an either or. And as I've said before, it starts defining boundaries, and lines or distinctions become boundaries that we can't cross. It sometimes determines who's pure enough or worthy enough, and it cuts people off, and it cuts off experience. He talks about how we can kind of unknowingly be binding up God, making God distant and elite. He says we're forced to then pretend, suppress, repress, deny, or become a hypocrite. And he goes on to say the very structures of much religion encourage people to act and pretend. He says, you see the text through your available eyes. You hear a text from your own level of development and consciousness. Punitive people love punitive texts. Loving people hear in the same text calls to discernment, clarity, choice, and decision. And in between the two, there is a great gulf, not allowing one to cross from one side to another, from Luke 16:26. All we can do is to help people grow, and then they can hear scripture maturely. That's his reference to the value of scripture, that it's a matter of consciousness. He says mature religion involves changing ourselves and letting ourselves be changed by a mysterious encounter with grace, mercy, and forgiveness. This is the truth that will set us free. Yet much of our history has involved trying to change other people with our ideas. This has gotten us almost nowhere. It's actually gotten us to a lot of places we don't want to be, right? He says, and it allowed us to remain in our untransformed and unconverted selves. Unconverted, to be unconverted ourselves. He says, remember, it is only transformed people who have the power to transform others, as if by osmosis. Remember that part, as if by osmosis. the power to transform others, but as if by osmosis. Mary and Martha, the ant on the hand, each one of us in the spiritual experience. Usually, he says, you can lead others only as far as you have gone. Too often we try to push, intimidate, threaten, cajole, and manipulate others. It seldom works because that's not the way the soul works. He says, surely God does not exist so that we can think correctly about him or her. Amazingly and wonderfully, like all good parents, God desires instead the flourishing of what God created and what God loves, us, ourselves. Ironically, he says, we flourish more by learning from our mistakes and changing than by a straight course that teaches us nothing. Last year for Christmas, I'm always trying to think of what to get my parents. They don't need gifts, and they let me know that there's no need for gifts. And still, sometimes I want to do something just to let them know in that form that I love them. And I was thinking of gifts, and I found something called Storyworthy. And Storyworthy is a program, kind of invitation, and it sends a question, and it can be a question every week, a question every day, a question every month, but it sends these questions, and then at the end of the year you can decide if you want to you get one book and you put all the questions into a book, and you can make other copies for other people, but you just answer that one question a week, and then at the end of the year it compiles it all as a book. And we're about at the end of the year, and I got this for my dad last year for Christmas, and he's been answering the questions. Every once in a while, I catch one of the emails, and I'm not usually on, if you know email and you know me, I'm not on enough to catch very many of them, but I catch the divine appointments. And this one came by my box, and I got to read it because I had gotten on to see when it was ending. And it was this question. And I have the ability to shift the question. That's a key point for all of us in life. You have the ability to shift the question. And I wanted to make sure to get the rest of the good questions in, right? In the last few weeks that we have. What is your best advice when it comes to raising children? And he said this: a major concern with children is watching them. I think this is not a very good framework for raising children. Watching them suggests that our job is to monitor them, to correct their mistakes, and to make sure that they are on the right path. A better view is to realize that they are always watching you. That the way you interact with them and with others serves as a model for their behavior. Supporting them in what they do and giving them unconditional love is my fundamental principle for raising children. Raising children is much like the idea of the spiritual path, that we are being raised into God consciousness. So rather than judging, rather than watching each other, and even watching ourselves, let's watch God and the fullness that is that love, that wholeness, that wonder, and that beauty that God consciousness is. Namaste. So I invite us into a deep breath and a deep practice to take these teachings and just allow ourselves to have an experience in this moment. In our time of meditation, We begin our meditation by getting comfortable right where you are, gently closing your eyes if you choose, or softening your gaze. Inviting the body into 3 deep inhales and exhales. Relaxing. Arriving. Focusing on this now moment, right here. Quiet. Calm. Gazing peacefully, gazing inwardly. Diving into the inner life. Moving from outer prayer into the spiritual practice, the interior practice. Safe in the power and the presence. And as Richard Rohr says, allowing the divine gaze to invite and heal our unconscious. We are worthy. There are no rules. There is no code, no membership, no requirement. The desire to show up in this holy instant opens the door and illuminates the altar. We are open, receptive, and responsive. We live and move and have our being in God. It is safe to grow. It is safe to change. It is safe to open the mind. It is safe to let go of the blindness, the attachments, the need for security, and to breathe into third eye seeing. To let go of that which no longer serves us. And to embrace the fullness of what is available in us, through us, as us, to us, from us. We inhale and exhale into the silence. By the power of this practice, may all beings have freedom from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings know God as love and themselves as emanations of this love. May all beings know that we are born blessed and here to be a blessing. Namaste.